Los Angeles, the city of stars, speed and spectacle. Luxury cars weren't rare here, they were part of the scenery. From Beverly Hills to Malibu, gleaming supercars rolled down palm-lined boulevards as casually as pickup trucks in the Midwest. But inside one of the city's most prestigious dealerships, trouble was brewing. A brand new McLaren, the crown jewel of the showroom, had suddenly broken down. Not just any McLaren, this was the latest model, a machine worth more than most houses in Los Angeles. It had been shipped straight from the factory in England, promised as perfect engineering, flawless performance. Yet within hours of its arrival, the engine refused to start. The dealership called in their top engineers. Certified McLaren specialists in crisp uniforms hovered over the car, laptops hooked up to the onboard computer. They ran test after test, diagnostics, and even cross-checked with factory data. Hours passed. Customers waiting in the lounge grew restless. The staff whispered nervously, this wasn't just a car, it was a symbol of their reputation. But nothing worked. The engineers scratched their heads, frustrated. The dealership manager, red-faced and sweating, slammed his clipboard on the counter. This car was supposed to be perfect. We've got clients coming in an hour. What am I supposed to show them? A $2 million paperweight? The tension in the garage was thick. Some engineers quietly packed up their tools, convinced the problem would have to be reported back to McLaren's headquarters overseas. Others whispered that the car might need to be shipped back altogether. The idea was humiliating for the dealership. And then, amidst the chaos, came the quiet sound of footsteps. Everyone turned. Out from the back of the garage walked a young woman in a faded mechanic's jacket. She was wiping grease from her hands with a rag, her hair tied back, her expression calm. She didn't wear a crisp uniform, nor did she carry expensive diagnostic tools. To most of the staff, she was just the garage girl, the one who handled minor repairs, cleaned up after big jobs, and fetched parts when the engineers needed them. The moment she stepped closer, a couple of engineers exchanged skeptical looks. One of them muttered under his breath, "What's she doing here? This isn't an oil change." Another chuckled. "She probably just wants to watch." But the young woman wasn't intimidated. She glanced at the McLaren, then at the frustrated engineers, and finally at the dealership manager. With a calm voice that cut through the tension, she said, "Let me try." For a few seconds, silence hung in the air. The engineers froze, a few snickered. The manager raised an eyebrow, looking her up and down as if she had lost her mind. This car is worth more than 10 of your paychecks," he scoffed. "Our best team couldn't figure it out. What makes you think you can?" She didn't argue, she didn't defend herself. Instead, she stepped closer, eyes fixed on the car like it was a puzzle waiting to be solved. The confidence in her posture silenced the laughter. She gently laid her hand on the hood, almost as if she could feel the heartbeat of the machine beneath the cold metal. Something about her presence made the room pause. With a deep breath, she picked up a wrench from the nearest workbench. The dealership manager crossed his arms, clearly expecting her to embarrass herself, but she ignored him. She popped open the hood with steady hands and leaned over the engine. The engineers crowded around, half curious, half amused. One whispered, "Does she even know what she's looking at?" Another replied, "This'll be fun to watch." But as she leaned closer, her expression sharpened. She wasn't fumbling, she wasn't guessing, she was listening, the way a musician listens to a piano that's out of tune, or the way a doctor listens to a heartbeat. Every wire, every bolt, every component told her something. The silence grew heavier. Even the skeptics stopped chuckling. She traced the wiring harness with her fingers, followed the fuel line with her eyes, and tapped a sensor with the back of her wrench. Minutes passed. The engineers exchanged nervous glances. Something about the way she moved was unsettling. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. Finally, she looked up, her eyes locked with the dealership manager's. "Your diagnostics won't show it," she said calmly. "This isn't a software error. It's mechanical, hidden deep in the wiring harness." The engineers blinked in disbelief. "That's impossible," one of them scoffed. "We checked every reading." She cut him off with a quiet but firm voice. "You checked what the computer told you, but sometimes machines lie." The room went dead silent. The dealership manager shifted uncomfortably. For the first time that day, he didn't have a snappy response. All he could do was watch as she reached deeper into the engine bay, her hands working with precision. The tension was unbearable. Some of the staff leaned forward, holding their breath. Even the skeptical engineers, men who had dismissed her just minutes ago, were now watching her every move. She adjusted a connection, twisted a wire, and then tightened a bolt with a decisive click. Finally, she closed the hood. Wiping the last bit of grease from her hands, she stepped back and handed the keys to the dealership manager. The garage was silent, so silent you could hear the faint hum of the fluorescent lights above. The young woman had just finished adjusting the last connection inside the McLaren's complex wiring harness. No laptop, no scanner, no expensive McLaren factory diagnostics, just her eyes, her ears, and her instincts. She wiped her hands on the faded cloth tucked in her jacket pocket, then stepped back. For a moment, she looked at the car the way an artist looks at a nearly finished painting, calm, confident, certain of her work. Then she extended the key fob toward the dealership manager. "Try it now," she said softly. The manager hesitated. His jaw tightened, his pride wounded. This was the same car his engineers, people trained, certified, and backed by one of the most prestigious supercar brands in the world, had failed to repair. He wanted to dismiss her. He wanted to say, "If you're wrong, you'll pay for it." But something in her tone, something in the steady way she looked at him, made him pause. Slowly, with dozens of eyes locked on him, the manager slid into the driver's seat. He pressed the start button. For half a second, nothing happened. The crowd of engineers smirked knowingly. But then, a deep, throaty roar shook the entire garage. The McLaren's engine came alive, its exhaust growling like a beast released from chains. The sound bounced off the walls, filling the space with pure adrenaline. It wasn't just running, it was purring, smooth and flawless, the way only a hand-built supercar could. The silence of doubt exploded into gasps. A few of the engineers literally stepped back in shock, their faces pale. The manager's eyes went wide, and he gripped the steering wheel as if he couldn't believe what was happening. She had done it. The car that had defeated every certified mechanic and computer diagnostic in the building had just been revived by a young woman most of them barely acknowledged. For a moment, nobody spoke. Everyone was too stunned to react, and then the applause started. One of the customers waiting in the lounge clapped first, a loud, echoing clap that broke the spell. Then another joined in, and another, until the entire showroom was alive with applause and cheers. Someone pulled out their phone to record. Then another, and another. Within minutes, half the staff had their cameras up, documenting the moment. The young woman didn't bask in the glory. She didn't smile, didn't pose for the cameras. She just stepped back, folded her rag, and tucked it into her jacket pocket like this was just another job. For her, it wasn't about attention. It was about respect for the machine, about solving a puzzle no one else could. But the world outside that garage saw something different. The video clips went online within the hour. Titles like "She Fixed a McLaren Their Engineers Gave Up On" and "The Garage Girl Who Outshined McLaren Specialists" began flooding social media. On TikTok, her calm, confident expression as she said "try it now" went viral. On YouTube, reaction channels replayed the moment the McLaren roared to life, calling it the most satisfying car repair ever caught on camera. The dealership's phones began to ring non-stop. Some callers wanted to buy cars, others just wanted to know who she was. Reporters started emailing. A local news station even sent a crew to the dealership the next day. But inside the garage, the atmosphere was far more complicated. The engineers, men who had once chuckled at her presence, now stood in uneasy silence. Their pride was wounded, their egos bruised. One muttered, "It was probably luck." Another tried to save face, claiming he almost found the same issue. But deep down, they all knew the truth. She had seen what they couldn't. The dealership manager, meanwhile, was in a bind. On one hand, his reputation had just been saved. Without her, the McLaren would have been a public relations disaster. On the other hand, admitting that a garage worker had outsmarted his certified team was humiliating. Still, as he stepped out of the car, the cheers of customers and the glow of cameras forced his hand. He looked at her, forcing a stiff smile. "Good work," he said reluctantly. She simply nodded. She didn't need his approval. Later that night, as the dealership lights dimmed and the last customers left, she slipped out quietly. She didn't crave interviews or headlines. All she wanted was the satisfaction of a job well done. But the internet had other plans. By morning, her face was everywhere. The story had gone viral worldwide. People weren't just amazed by the repair, they were inspired. Comments flooded social media. She didn't just fix a car, she broke every stereotype. Proof that real talent doesn't need a fancy title. Respect to her, this is why you never underestimate anyone. What had started as a dealership's nightmare had become a modern legend. And though she never asked for the spotlight, one thing was undeniable. She didn't just fix a McLaren, she shattered expectations about mechanics, about women in the industry, about who deserves to be called an expert. In a city obsessed with stars, that night, the brightest one walked out of a garage in a faded mechanic's jacket.